So in this video I wanted to have a look at some different ways you can lace your shoe to provide greater stability of your foot inside your shoe as you're trekking, and this particularly comes relevant when you're working or walking ascents and descents, so your foot tends to slide in the footbed more, or your shoe's a bit wet so it's a bit sloppier. So first of all, you need to look at what sort of shoe you've got. So got three of the classic types of shoe lacing structures that you get when you buy your shoe, so not really changeable. One is the standard lace-up structure where you have essentially a single hole at the top here, and that's what I call the most basic form of lacing. Then you have your sort of speed lacing setup, which is where either you have a hook around setup, say like in the Hoka here, that's also speed lacing, and then they've got the two quick ones at the top. In the Scarpa GTX they don't have a hook quick one, it's two quick ones to come at the top of the shin bone here. That's the sort of speed lacing style. And then you got your third style, which probably comes more from your runners. When you look at the evolution of the cross trainer, the trail runner, it almost basically is a running shoe. They've just changed the grip significantly underneath for better grip on terrain that's wet, loose, that sort of stuff. But they've kept the same lacing design, and what they've done there is they have these two little holes. Now, similar to the Merrell, which has got a singular hole, that could be, and a lot of people don't even realise it's there for a reason, but they just lace it up as a standard shoe across the front like the Merrell has got. But what you have is the capacity to double this lace back on itself, creating a loop, and I'll show you what that can be done as far as stabilising your foot inside the shoe. Three types of lacing design. One I just call my standard or my scout lacing, which I usually do with every shoe that I put on, particularly if you've got a thick tongue like the Merrell has got, because it tends to, yeah, it's nice and cushioning, but there's a lot of give in that system, and that's my biggest gripe pretty with the Hoka too. They haven't worked out their tongue very well, so when you start lacing it up it gets all bunched and it's really messy. So that's my not so good feature with the Hokas. The Merrell, very padded, very comfortable type of tongue, fits in nicely when you lace it up firmly, and rather than just do your single turnover, what I call my scout lacing, or just being prepared for what might happen, you throw it around a second time and you get this greater resistance and abrasion, so when you cinch it down tight it just holds a lot firmer in that position, so then you can do your lace and your double lace. So if I'm going to be hiking, I'll just, as a first prevention, my scout lacing will be that process, and that sort of keeps it tight. Whereas if you just do a single standard lap around, and especially got a padded tongue, you pull that down and it bounces basically straight out, like it just doesn't grip enough to hold it in place. So throw in that extra twist, and that's my scout lacing design. Gives me a better grip, and then you go into your normal lacing structure. The second type of lacing, which is where you can integrate both the scout, the double twist, but also you can start to utilize this second hole. And the way they do that is that you take your standard lacing process, so you're pulling it tight, and then rather than crossing over and going to your lacing straight away, you push your lace back through that second hole and you leave a loop on either side. What you're doing is you're going to create almost like a pulley system, so a mechanical advantage, and you now take the opposite lace and you thread it through its opposite hoop, and you do that on both sides, and you're creating a point of leverage. You're pulling down, you're tightening it, you're pulling up, so it's like a leverage type system, and you get a very tight, don't go too tight, across the front of your anterior tendon. So watch out for your tibialis anterior and the extension digitorum longus. You pull too tight on that, there's too much pressure, and then you create an irritation point. So be firm but not too tight. Then you can go with your scalp preparation, double lap over, so good grip, and into your normal lacing structure. In that case, a really good sensation of pulling your foot back into your heel cup. So you've got a really good interface, nice and firm, nice and secure between your foot and your shoe, and that's going to minimize that sort of sliding and potential chance of getting a blister. So that's the way you use that second hole if it's made in your shoe. Now, sometimes, often, it's not. So with the metal, you might think, oh geez, I can't do that, I can only do the scout lacing. But if that hole is big enough and your lace is skinny enough, you might be able to just actually get it back in that same single hole, thereby creating a loop. So you can do it, it just depends upon the size of your lace and also the size of that hole. So I would just then transfer those over as before, and actually I can do it with the merrills, which is great, it's got a very padded tongue, and I can cinch that down nice and tight, creating that same effect but only having to use that one hole to get my leverage effect across the front of the shoe. Now the final lacing design I wanted to show you, basically people that sometimes across the top of their foot they've got a very bony prominence, and with friction backwards and forwards and up and down, that can create quite an irritation site. Also, if as the hiking goes on or it's a warm day and your feet starts to broaden out and you don't have enough width in that toe box, that pressure of your foot trying to spread out and spray, and then also the walking can compress and irritate these nerves that you have between your metatarsal bones in your foot, and it's the nerve which can get irritated from the constant side to side motion of your metatarsal heads. They go up and down, the nerves between the two can get irritated, and commonly between your third and your fourth you have a spot there which is a bit more vulnerable because two nerves come together and they're a bit bigger, and that's where you get your Morton's neuroma. And I've had that left and right. The left one I had some surgery on, the right one I'm managing it rather than having surgery. But one thing you can do to minimize that, if you're starting to notice a bit of compression in your foot, like irritation between the toes, or this top side of your foot is becoming irritated, it's not really going to happen in shoes like the Merrill because you've got such a padded tongue. But what you're looking at doing is just taking pressure off that site. So rather than just have your crisscross lace style, which is pretty standard, you literally just skip out that section of the lacing crossing and you just thread your lace up the sides of your shoe. So you leave that side area uncompressed as you're pulling your laces tight, and that will give that section of your foot a bit more room to expand. But of course we don't want the foot sliding around inside the shoe, so what we can then do is go to our other lacing designs that we discussed previously to make sure that we've got some good and solid contact between the shoe and the foot, and that would be starting with our Scout design. So you get lacing up there, and then we could go through and do our other where you can increase the amount of compression at your ankle joint but not overdo the compression across the front of your midfoot. And you're kind of combining two things together. You're shifting the load away from where you're vulnerable, which in this case would be across the top of your foot, and you're then moving it back up into other areas where you know you're comfortable, which is at the rear of your foot or your hind foot, and you're using a lacing design to really maximize the security at that point, and making sure you still have a really good grip interface between your shoe and your sock. So I've got a nice firm point of contact at the hind foot, drawing my heel back and into the heel cup of the shoe, but I've left this area through here, so I've got a bit more expansion in my midfoot and forefoot. If say my toe box was too narrow, or if my foot was spraying out because of the heat and the long day and I could feel it was a bit compressed, or us getting an irritation point across the top of my foot. That's a way in which you can shift those load parameters but still keep your foot nice and stable and safe for when you're hiking.